Let me thank you, and let me thank my friend and colleague, Congressman Pastor, for his efforts to strip this rider from the Interior Appropriations Bill. The most interesting thing, we have 40 riders on it, in which we're essentially on this creating policy around environmental issues on a spending bill. And for us, this particular rider is something that the American people don't want. And as the Congressman said, we're all sons of Arizona. Myself, Ed, Mr. Flake, Mr. Franks, Mr. Gosar, who are part of the effort to put that rider in. We are less Brutus-like. We think our obligation is to protect that canyon. And I think I'm associating myself with what Ed said. There is a legacy that we're trying to protect, and it's the Grand Canyon. There is some sustainable issues that we're trying to protect as well. The water supply to countless millions of people in Nevada, Arizona, and California. The sacred, cultural, and historical significant points to the Native American people that live around and in the Grand Canyon. All those things are at stake. And the Grand Canyon, being the crown jewel of our national park system, deserves much more than a little rider snuck in through the back door on an appropriations bill. And now the last thing I heard is they're touting this one person that is an expert on the effects of uranium mining around the Grand Canyon, and an expert on what the effects would be of the withdrawal, essentially saying there would be no negative adverse effect. It's just coincidentally, she has numerous mining claims within that withdrawal area, and if there was to be an opportunity for sale or resale, I'm sure she would take advantage of that. So I think we should take her advice with a significant grain of salt. I also think that this is an issue that huge percentage of the American people, 65, 66, and in Arizona higher, support the withdrawal that Secretary Salazar asked for and is recommending as a preferred alternative. But it's also what we're doing with this rider, taking away the opportunity to study, to do the consequential fact and science studies about that withdrawal. And so I believe that Mr. Pastor's effort and all of our efforts to strike this rider from the legislation is a necessary, vital, and critical step in the long-term viability of the Grand Canyon. It is more than just the propriety of the Arizona. It's not just an Arizona issue. This is a national issue. It should be dealt with, and it should be taken very seriously. With that, let me thank Environment America for the wonderful study, very apropos and on time, and also tell you that there's something that about this issue that I think in the long term we're going to prevail. There's something, there's a different strength there when you talk about the Grand Canyon, and so we're going to go through these machinations. But as the native people around the canyon say, that the inevitable is the inevitable, that canyon will be there, and that our efforts, all of your efforts and all of our efforts to protect it and secure it aren't going to triumph. And our first step toward that will be the striking of Flake's rider. And curious that he's going to run for the Senate in the state of Arizona, and he's going to be able to brag that he brought uranium mining to the Grand Canyon. I think that'll be a very interesting campaign issue for many of us as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Because
when I was doing the Energy and Water Appropriation Bill the last 4 years, I championed the rebirth and renewal of the nuclear energy industry in the United States. In fact, championed a $25 billion loan guarantee because I believe that that was another source of energy for our country that we had to consider. Well, yesterday they called me to tell me how disappointed they were about the amendment that would strike the earmark that Jeff Flake has included in the Interior Bill. And I proceeded to tell them that for various reasons, I felt that the amendment had to go forward, and it was more important that we protect the Grand Canyon and keep the uranium mining from occurring. Now, the Salazar proposal only talks about new claims. So we're not talking about past claims that we have around the Grand Canyon. He's concerned that the new claims will continue to provide toxic materials to our watershed and cause other harms. Well, I can tell you without a doubt, I grew up in a copper mining town, and we produced molybdenum and silver and gold and other metals. And so I know what it is to live next to a tailing dump that's left from mining, and to see what it can do to water sources as well as to the environment in terms of the dust when the wind comes, to the people that in the proximity, how it may affect their health. And so I've had a lifetime experience of being with the mining situation. Well, much is said today that back in 1984, Congressman Mo Udall, Chairman Udall, and Barry Goldwater struck a deal about the Arizona Strip. Well, I have to tell you that they did cut a deal, and we had the bill that passed, the Arizona Wilderness Act of 1984. But I think both of them, and since then things have changed, but I think the intent at that time was not to get the agreement in solid stone and forever not have it change, but I think their intent was that we would have the opportunity, as generation after generation came forward in Arizona and this country, what could be done to protect the Grand Canyon and other areas that would need to be protected in Arizona. So this idea that in 1984 there was a compromise, and I'm sure there was a compromise because the bill had to get through the House and the Senate, that now we can't do anything in order to change that compromise. Well, the legacy of Barry Goldwater is the legacy of the Grand Canyon. If you read about Barry Goldwater, when he first started his politics, when he first started, it was always about the Grand Canyon. How to protect it, how to preserve it, the photos of the Grand Canyon. And so it'd be hard for me to understand today that Barry Goldwater in 1984 felt that the compromise he made then meant that nothing could be done 30 some odd years later. Because I think Barry Goldwater knew that the canyon needed to be protected at all costs, and was willing to have future generations look at what needed to be done. The legacy of Mo Udall is conservation, not only in Arizona, Alaska. If you go and read about his legacy was conservation of public lands. It'd be hard for me to believe that Mo Udall, in making this compromise, said that the 84 compromise was written in stone, and therefore there could be no changes. Because if there was one thing that I knew of Mo Udall, Mo wanted to preserve and felt that every future generation, as they encountered new developments, should have the ability to continue to assess and preserve in order that the Grand Canyon and other lands could be preserved. I was at the Grand Canyon when Bill Clinton signed the law, creating large strips of the Grand Canyon into monuments. Things have changed, and it's my belief that the icons of Arizona, Barry Goldwater and Mo Udall, would today ask us to look at what's happening today and protect the Grand Canyon. The reality is that these reserves of uranium in northern Arizona is about 12% of the total reserves in this country. And if you go to people that understand mining, etc., will tell you that these reserves can give you at best 6 years of mining if the ore is used domestically. So for 6 years of mining, for a few hundred jobs, we are now endangering the 5 million people that come to the Grand Canyon every year. If you multiply by 6, you would have the 30 million people that would come to the Grand Canyon. The amount of money that's generated by tourism, the amount of jobs, 12,000 jobs. So you endanger that by allowing to continue the new claims on the Grand Canyon. So for a few jobs, we destroy, we screw up the Grand Canyon, the natural wonder of this world that people travel from all over this world to come see. And so there's a commercial going on and that you may have seen. It says, "Congressman, what made you do this?" Well, my only question to Congressman Flake is, "Congressman, what made you do this?" It's a bad idea.
Great. Thank you, Congressman Pastor. I wanted to get started, and first, thank you all for coming. My name is Aurilio, and I direct the DC Office for Environment America. And we're a federation of 29 state-based, citizen-funded environmental advocacy groups, including Environment Arizona, which is going to be releasing this report today and warning about the dangers to the Grand Canyon of uranium mining. And several other of our state groups actually are releasing it. So we have Environment California and Environment Nevada that are going to be warning the local press about the dangers that uranium mining around the Grand Canyon could pose to their waterways. Then Environment Colorado and Environment New Mexico, their states are actually featured in this report as case studies to the harm and the public health threats posed by uranium mining. And finally, Environment Virginia is releasing this report today because Virginia is actually recently in the crosshairs for the uranium mining industry. So that's basically what we're doing today, and I'm honored to be joined by 2 champions for the Grand Canyon, soon to be 3, Congressman Ed Pastor of Arizona and Jane Danowitz of the Pew Environment Group. And our basic message today is clear. Americans love the Grand Canyon, and we should not allow the uranium mining companies to trash our national treasure. Our report shows that uranium mining has left a disastrous legacy of toxic pollution across the West. Now mining companies pose a risk to the Grand Canyon. They filed thousands of claims, and those would threaten to destroy the canyon's stunning landscape and its ecosystem and pollute the Colorado River, again, drinking water for 25 million people. The canyon already bears the scars of past mining activity, so in the report we document how hikers on some of the trails are warned not to drink from 4 separate streams, including one that comes down the south rim past the Orphan Mine because of radioactive waste. Now the mining industry has had an explosion of mining claims, and we have to stop them. Again, we can't let uranium mining claims turn our national treasure into a toxic waste dump. Our report shows that people living around uranium mining sites have suffered major health problems as a result of the contamination.